Okay, so anybody have any thoughts or questions about the chapter to get to? Did it all make sense? Intuitive?
I think so for the most part. Let me see. I didn't write any notes. That's good. You should catch up before before jumping into the later chapters.
I think this one's a fairly straightforward one. Like if you've read chapter 2, like you've gotten an introduction, it's understandable enough, I would say.
I did read chapter 2. You said chapter 2 is really important. You have to read this one, and then I did it. I did read chapter
Great.
2.
Okay.
I read chapter 4, and then I read chapter 2, and then I read chapter 4 again.
I would read chapter 2 before chapter 4, for sure.
I'd also recommend reading them in order.
I wouldn't necessarily say all of them in order, but like the basics of the language and language features are like 1, 2, 3, 4 makes sense. And then from there, maybe
1 through 6 in that order, but it didn't work out that way.
Okay.
Time managed to get away from me once again. So,
I can't believe it.
I read 4, and then you told me read chapter 2. That one's really important. So then I read chapter 2, and then I read chapter 4 again. And I was going to try to squeeze in chapter 2 again.
Chapter 4 was tough.
Yeah, chapter 4 was a slog. It took more time than it should have.
It's very refreshing that it's a lot less effort on my end to do these after chapter 4.
Yeah, I'm comforting myself knowing that you've been through the book a couple times.
Yep, it is not a fun one. You kind of have to know it, but at least you can't make a mistake. The compiler will stop you.
That is also extremely comforting. I'm just reminding myself, like, it's not how it used to be.
Yeah. Okay, let's get started then.
Let's go.
Yeah, so for everyone who didn't read the chapter, it's on error handling. So the main question,
error handling, I didn't even realize we were on 9. I would have read the wrong one anyway.
Okay. Well, the goal, Rust's general plan for things is you should handle your errors. And
I agree.
It has a pass your errors by value approach. So like if you think of something like JavaScript, you don't really know what's going to happen. You might throw an error, you might return an error. It's not known. And then through there, you have to throw try-catch around almost everything. But Rust kind of says, okay, this is what happens. Typically in some documentation, I didn't prepare any specific ones that could error. I know mutexes do. So
I could cause some errors.
Ignore what a mutex is. You don't have to know until like chapter 19. But we can make a new mutex and then that's not what I want. Oh, it's lock, not unwrap. Yeah, so lock. So like we see this, it has a little section on errors and when it panics. That is a convention. I could do this for my own personal functions as well, because this is just Markdown. You can put Markdown in your comments. Pretty fancy.
What? Are you serious?
Yeah.
Oh, that's awesome.
You can write tests in your comments too. Like all of this is just a comment. It's not anything extra, not anything fancy. Yeah.
No, that is super extra fancy. What are you talking about?
Rust is too cool. Ever. Like, come on.
Yeah, like look at this. Hi. And then here's a code block. And then you can add like a test in here. I'm not going to do it, but Like, look at this. Wow, there's a stuff in here.
Dang.
Oh yeah,
cool.
and this is a doc test. We can run this, and when we run tests, and
What's
it'll
a
make
doc
sure our
test?
documentation. It's a test in your documentation.
Wow.
Like if
But
I have
it
an
doesn't
example,
actually.
it does
But
actually
when
run.
You said you. I thought you said there wasn't a test there. I didn't see a.
Oh, I didn't write a test. Like it checks to see if that panics, but I just said let x equals 5, which is not a very good test. But I could do something like run the actual function and assert that it does this thing, which a lot of functions do in the standard library.
Okay.
So like
there's nothing between like just a regular documentation comment and a test, like a run test documentation comment or whatever. Like any of those would just be a doc test.
you need a triple slash for it to work.
Okay.
So like if you look here, see like how these have assert equal? These are guaranteed to be correct because it runs the test. So this
but
can
it
never
treats
become
any
wrong.
like series of triple slashes like as a doc test, basically. So you can just put whatever you want in there to run the doc test.
That is not the case.
Yes, doc test.
So if I do this, this is not a doc test. There's no code block in here. Once I add these triple backticks, the code fence, that's now a doc test.
Okay.
So if I delete this,
the
it's
code block. Okay.
Yeah. With no code block, it's not a doc test. It's just a doc comment without that.
That's what I was trying to figure out. Okay.
Yeah.
But wait, there's a Rust book. Hold on, let me.
Yeah, there is.
Cool.
Yeah, so learn something new every day. But not to get too off track about that, we all know Rust documentation is beautiful, and that is one of the reasons why. But yeah, we're gonna get into actually panicking, so we can panic in here to say I don't want to get too off track.
I don't want to get too off track. We're just gonna panic here.
Yeah, we gotta get straight into it. We're gonna throw an error. So you can see here thread main panicked at source main.rs 25. It says uh-oh. We don't get a backtrace here unless we give it this environment variable. And we can find out here that uh-oh has all this stuff. Like we used the panic macro right here. It called the format on here. Like we could decide to format something. Yeah, just all this stuff. Here's the backtrace. I don't need to say the stack trace or anything. I will assume everybody here knows what that is. But yeah. We get some of these features in here, but if we run it in release mode, that turns off debug symbols, so we'll get less information here. So we get all this stuff instead, which is less user-friendly. Don't worry too much about what all this stuff is, but keep in mind that's what we get on a panic. Any questions there?
Nope.
Okay. Yeah. So at this point, instead of going through the chapter like normal and asking questions along the way, I think it makes sense to just do a bunch of examples and ask, should we panic in this situation or should we not panic in this situation, and maybe code some things out.
Nice.
That's my secret, though. I'm always panicking.
And I don't ever panic, so I think it's a great oppositional way to approach this.
Excellent.
Yeah. So it's a pretty subjective thing, depending. A lot of the times there is a clear answer, but yeah, it's subjective. Depends on what you would like to do. So, for an example,
Well, we've already stated our stances are both for and against.
I mean, I will argue. If you can argue your point, then maybe I'll agree with you. So, what
I
about
find it unpleasant.
if we have a function called get config? Should this return a result? This is a function that gets the config. Let's say for Vim, your Vim bindings.
Very
Should
important
this
config.
instead crash your whole Vim experience? Just end it there. You're not allowed to use Vim if you don't have a config? Or should you be allowed to, should it be handled? Should it create something for you? Should we do something else or just crash?
Just panic. If you don't have a Vim RC, you shouldn't be using Vim. Come on. I'm sorry. No, it should probably be a result so you can handle an error or make a file if you don't have one.
Okay. Sounds good to me. Any opposing opinions?
Mm-mm.
Crickets.
Okay, sounds good. And I will... I don't have to do that. I could just say... Nah, I'll just say... handle error. So let's do a different one. So here's a real world case I dealt with before, which is convert a Usize to U64. So in this case, for context, a Usize just has to be greater than, I believe 16 bits. I might be wrong there. But typically it's going to be 32 bits or 64 bits depending on your architecture. And if you run your code on some really fancy computer with a different amount of bits, like 65 bits or 128 bits or 79 bits, whatever you want to do, then in this case, we would have an issue. So let's say we're doing we have a Usize here, which is Bell. So then what should we do? Should we return this result? Or should we panic in the case that it doesn't work out and we're running on some really fancy machine?
You probably want an error instead of panicking, because then you can determine if you're gonna use like some different integer type or
So,
do
like, the panic is like a last resort, like
yeah,
things have gone irreparably wrong issue, right?
Yeah, you don't want to go forward because this is some invariant state. You have decided as a programmer, if this state this state shouldn't happen, and if it does happen, we can't recover from it.
Yeah, it seems really rare that.
Yeah, like please don't do that.
Yeah,
Why are
like,
you doing that? Please.
But yeah, it's
code
like
more
in this
responsibly.
case, would you always want to panic if you can't use like that conversion, right, to a U64? Like, does your program entirely rely on that U64 type or something?
Like, no,
Let's say it's an
return
ID.
a friendly error instead.
Like you managed to get an ID that's like, I don't know, the biggest, like U64 max.
Yeah.
And
Also, hello.
or like Usize max is 128-bit. In that
No,
case,
like, just return a friendly error instead. Be like, that's silly. Please don't do this to me. Or like, not a valid value. Are we allowed to do that instead of panicking? That sounds a bit silly.
we can.
Yeah, I would say in pretty much every case, unless there's something like at the operating system level or something, like I don't know when you would want to actually panic. Did they give some examples in the chapter? I feel like they did.
They do give examples of panics. I mean, we'll give it here. I can give my opinion on it.
Yeah.
There is a way to assert the size of a variable. Or not a variable,
I
like you
feel
can assert the number of bits, or I've done it
I
somewhere.
feel like you would just want to like validate the input first, and then
How so?
do a check first.
So like check if this U size is greater than U64 max.
Yeah.
So like if this is greater than not U65, U64 max.
Yeah, then like prompt the user to be sensible.
Turn
I'm just going to give you my very awful pseudocode here instead of something helpful. Why did you do that? Exactly.
If there's a case where you're not like,
Perfect.
let's say it could be like a, what was it? You said U16 was the minimum size for Usize.
I'm not
Like,
entirely
what if
sure,
you-
but yeah.
Yeah, so like what if you run into that case? Maybe you just like your program, you just don't want to support like a U size of U16. If you're running on like a 16-bit operating system, it's just not going to run and you don't really care. Like in that case, I could see why you might just panic because it's just like it's just easier to handle it that way, and you're basically never going to be running on a 16-bit operating system, or you can like confirm that basically by whoever you expect to be running your program.
The
Or
issue
by,
there is like we only care if it's bigger because we're cutting off some information, and then this will fail. If it's a U16, like if this is 16 bits, it'll fit within a U64 just fine.
Right. Yeah. So I was talking about like the opposite.
If it's too small.
Because this is, yeah. But yeah, I don't know about.
Oh yeah, this is
If it's too
mismatch types.
big.
We'd have to do something here. We'd have to do some shenanigans. Convert it. I guess we'd probably just handle it here, because this would fail in that case. We get some conversion error. But yeah, this is like a weird example, but we do have let's do it here.
Like I've gotten the vibe from the book in general that the people who created Rust wouldn't name something panic if we're supposed to be sprinkling it throughout our code liberally. Like it feels like a last resort situation that you should be avoiding.
Yeah. Yeah, it is.
We can do this. We can assert the size of this is bigger in memory, or they're equal. Like this is greater than or equal to. Why do I type out the whole thing every time? Usize. We're saying this is greater than that, and then in this case it's okay to run. And we can say it's safe to unwrap here, or expect. If only I knew how to do the correct amount of colons. But yeah, this works. Unless we're doing something weird and wacky. And then we can return our U64. So if you want to be really safe about it, you could throw this at the start of your program and say, okay, I know that this is the case, and we're not running on some weird machine. And then a U64 is gigantic for the greatest size, and like no computers use all that much. So to like sum it all up, I would say this is probably overkill to assert the size of this. This will run at compile time, I believe. Maybe it won't. I think it will.
Yeah, isn't that how asserts work?
Yeah, so this should run during compile time, and it won't add the overhead of checking if it's greater than a certain number. And in that case, we know this is always safe, and we can assert somewhere in a program and say, why are you using a quantum magic gigantic powerhouse computer to do this? So like I would say in this case it's most like I would just unwrap here or expect with some like nice error. So expect not 74. I can't type today. Something like that. We could say, why are we doing that? Like,
Yeah.
you shouldn't do something like that. And this, so in this case, we're saying we add a little message and we're saying we should not run this, or if this should always work, and if it doesn't, here's why it didn't. We decided to pick a big fancy thing. So we can call this pass it 10. And this is fine. Nothing happened here. But if we change this instead to like a U16, this is going to be smaller. Oh wait, I should have done it the other way around. Let's do a U8, that's less typing. So then this one fails. So it looks like it does not happen at compile time. Maybe it's because I did... Let's just try cargo run. Yeah, it still panics. It's a runtime check, it seems. Because can we cargo build just fine? Yeah, it's fine. It allows us to do that. Yeah.
Doesn't
at runtime.
Release mode disable asserts or something like that?
That's a debug assert.
Oh, okay. I didn't know that was a separate
Yeah, they're separate.
debug.
So, yeah, in this case, I would say we can expect most of the time that this should be fine. And if this is not the case, and for some reason we find need for all 64 bits in like 90 billion years, I don't know if 90 billion is a good number to say there, but U64 max is huge.
Very big. Way bigger than 90 billion.
It is. And I'll remove this assert. So like, yeah, look at how big this number is. Are you gonna reach that number ever? Maybe.
I don't even know what question we're asking people to supply a number for.
Well, that's the thing. It doesn't like you could have numbers that large, right? Like if you're doing like astronomical units or whatever, but you probably wouldn't be using integers, I guess. You'd be using some other like large number format or type instead of just base integers.
I think it's a different question than that. We're saying, is there architecture that exists that needs to use more than 64 bits? Because 64-bit computers now don't use all 64 bits most of the time.
Well, that's not what this function is asking. Is it?
That's just the question here. Because this conversion function will work every time. It doesn't, like, if it goes out of a U64, then that is a fault of our program. Because it wouldn't work on any architecture, because it would go out of a U64. It'd be too big.
Oh, because, okay, yeah, that makes sense. Because Usize is defined by the architecture.
Yeah, so we're worried about the architecture. If there's some weird architecture, in that case,
Right,
it would
right,
fail.
right. No, yeah, so it's fine.
So we have reasonable
It-
expectations for this to be fine. If it doesn't work, then something's wrong because we would be cutting off some information in our number.
Probably not using Rust anymore. If we're
Maybe.
dealing with that kind of architecture.
I mean, who knows?
Or maybe not this version of Rust anymore, anyway.
Probably.
We might
not.
want to run this binary for like 10 years on some different machines. You never know. And then in that case, it will fail and say, why did you do this?
I'm sure we'll hit 128-bit machines at some point in the next 50 years or whatever. There's probably going to be some Rust code around then somewhere.
But I would hope it would be updated.
Well, sure, but it's like if that's the function you're running, like
if someone
you might have updated that, but who knows? There's a lot of
someone-
legacy code out there that doesn't get updated for decades because it
Someone
just
digs up
does its
Jacob's
function
code.
and it works.
someone digs up this code at some point and is like, what the heck is going on here?
Rust archaeology.
I mean, it explains it right here.
Yep,
There
it's
we
right
go.
there. And then you fix it.
I think we're getting too much into the weeds at this point.
We are
Let's
way off track.
Work.
Yeah, and I didn't cause this one.
We're gonna instead do a fun little program. So
All programs.
As if we weren't just doing a fun little program.
we were getting way too into the weeds about like integer sizes and architecture and computers. Okay, so let's make a program that counts. It adds up numbers in a text file. So let's call it like
Oh, sorry, adds up what?
nums.txt.
I think it's just like numbers, like line by line.
Yeah, we're gonna separate them
Oh, okay.
by line. Yes. Oh, I forgot to turn on screencast mode.
This
There you go.
this 10 count as one number or two numbers?
It is one number.
Okay.
So, yeah, what questions do you have and how would we go about this?
I guess we should read the file some way. Probably line by line if we can. Or maybe the whole thing and then we can split it into lines.
That sounds good to me. Do you have a preference there?
I think there's a file system package or crate.
Yeah, there
FS.
is.
There's like a read file function or something or method.
Yeah, the book gets into how to do it on a much more granular scale, but
yeah, there's probably a better there's like a read lines function or something. I don't know. Read to string.
I don't know if there is read lines.
Maybe not. But read to string works because then you can just split it on new lines.
How many M's do you want there?
We want more, so we
there's a-
have to worry about it.
Oh,
But worry
I
about
see.
error handling. What if we
Yeah.
accidentally type something wrong in here? Like, let's actually... No, that's fine. We can leave it this way. But assume... Let's do it... Yeah, let's do it a different way. We have to call it. So, like,
Okay, I was just here to help you out, that's all.
And then we have path, which is a string slice. Oh no. Wow. Skill issue. Oh, this is one line, that's why. So we have this, we're gonna call some from file in here with nums.txt. And instead in here, we're going to use path. So like, let's just do something with this instead, which is debug print it. Wow, I can't believe Rust says it's useless to make a variable that doesn't return anything. Yeah, I should probably...
It's so picky.
I could return this at this point if we want. But, yeah. What should we do here? Like, let's say we're returning an I-32 at this point. Return 0. So, what should we do here? Should we allow this? Like, how should we handle this error? There could be an error if we read this to a string. We have a few different errors here. So there's an error if the path doesn't exist. If the contents are not valid UTF-8.
Yeah.
So, like, how should we handle these errors? Do we handle one error?
We
No errors?
can either use a match statement, or we could use the $sign or question mark syntax, I think. But wait, no, never mind. You probably want to use a match if we're actually going to do something different for each of those errors. But
I agree. We should write some sensible error statements.
what were all the
Sensible
errors
errors.
again?
Huh?
So we have errors if the path doesn't exist. We have an error
Mm-hmm.
if the file is not valid UTF-8.
Mm-hmm.
And that's it.
I mean, we'd probably just have the same response. Like, basically, you can't open the file. Or I guess we could just spit out, like, a more verbose error message, depending on which one we want. But then we would need to decide whether we want to propagate that error out or just return, like, 0. Because we'd probably want to propagate that error to the caller of the sum, whatever the name of that function is. Let's see. So we could wrap the I-32 in a result, I guess.
Yeah, but which one do you want to go with? You listed off a lot of options there.
Yeah, I'm just thinking it out loud. I would say the last one probably. Have a result type as a return so that we can wrap the I-32 with an error.
What does that mean?
Well, it means we're going to return the result type. So whoever calls the sum from file function would have to actually handle the error.
So you want to return a result.
Yeah.
I think this is a fine way to do it. I just, like, if this is the whole point of our function, or like our whole point of our executable to read from a file and get the sum, we can't really do anything after. So I think this would be an okay time to panic if we wanted to, because this is the entry point to our program. If this was like a separate piece later down the line,
Right.
maybe not.
I guess I would still just do that and then pass it into main, and then main can panic if it wants. But then, like, any functions I write,
Yeah, I think
give
that
me
makes
results.
sense. Typically, you do want to propagate if it's from a function.
Wait, like, was Neon saying that, like, if you would return a sensible error from this function, but then if main doesn't receive something sensible, then it can panic?
Yeah, basically main would be able to decide if it's going to panic, but that way, if you ever like want to export this function somewhere, like it ends up in a library somehow, like maybe it's not in just this main module. If that
Right,
function's
like
in a
some other
library,
function calls it somewhere else.
yeah, you don't want somebody else calling that function to just like get a panic. Like, it's better if it has like a result or an error type, and then it's like, okay, well, they can check the documentation or the actual typing of the function when they use it to decide if they're going to panic or just like maybe they propagate the error again or whatever else. But basically, until you get to the top level, I feel like it usually makes sense to just return results with like error information until you're like ready to use the value, pretty much.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, in a small example like this, you could just panic as well.
Yeah, okay. I think it's cool to go with just this approach. Oh, sorry, go ahead.
That's a tradition in Rust.
Most errors should be handled if it's possible. So like in a case like this where we're saying, okay, I want to read from a file, there's a bunch of different ways to we'll get through them all, but like you could handle the error, make a nice error message and say like on line 5 of nums.txt there is a malformed number. Like beans is not a number, so that would be more user friendly. Or you could opt to just fail. So typically, like one of those is clearly nicer than the other. But when you're prototyping, it's totally fine just to throw an error, but make sure you go back and fix it later.
Right, yeah. It would make sense to me to make this function like return a helpful error that's just like your file isn't readable. Like it doesn't have to be all that specific, but
well, that's basically
helpful. Like your file is unreadable for some reason. You should check that. And then like main can do whatever it wants with that information.
Yeah. I mean, it's weird. Like, I usually wouldn't write it like sum from file. Like, I would usually parse that out even more as to like, okay, you're reading the file. Like, have a function that's just like reading the file and like parsing it. And then once you actually have like known good data, then you would have another function that takes that data and runs the sum over it. But yeah, I don't know. Maybe we do want to do like more of that handling in this function. I don't know.
I'm not particularly worried about that because
this is an example.
I mean,
not really doing it.
It is an example, but it's not all that difficult to do in Rust. Like that's like we have the dot sum function, so that gets a sum of an iterator.
Even two functions out of it, but.
So like that's definitely debatable, but I feel like reading from a file is pretty easy because we just have fs read to string, and then we have some other helpful methods in there that make it a bit easier.
Yeah. So maybe
I'm much more concerned with function length than separating out.
Yeah, let's not worry about separating anything out. Let's say we have this function, we have to write it. What error are we returning? You said return an error. You didn't tell me what are we returning.
Maybe we want to add like custom errors because like in this test example where we have just like a string that's not an integer, we'd probably want to have something that's specifically for, okay, we read through the file and found something that wasn't an integer. So like your data is invalid, basically. Like, do we want like, we either want to say this file is invalid, fix your file, or maybe we can just ignore those.
See, and that's exactly what I was thinking. I was like, oh, look, it's going to skip that line 5 entirely. We're just not going to count beats at all.
Yeah, we could do that. That is a valid option.
If it was a file with no numbers in it, I would return an error and be like, yo, what do you want me to do with this?
You'd probably want to document that, though, as well, either like on the function, just to say like whether like the default behavior is to skip non-integer values or non-number values, I guess. Because we also need to consider that, like, what if we have a bunch of floats in there as well as integers?
Yeah, we could have another option too. Like,
I literally was expecting this to be like a file of prose with random numbers and then like string numbers, like the word 7.
Oh no, I'm not going to be that mean.
This is going to be tricksy.
Oh, well, that would make it even harder.
7 children were born.
Nah. That's called Advent of Code. We're not doing that right now. We're doing a simplistic problem for that reason. But yeah, so how would you say you want a custom error? How are we going to do that though?
So we're going to wrap this I-32 in something that makes sense for Rust.
Yeah, we did that. We have this value. We have this. We have an I-32 when it's okay. And we have a what? What?
I'm gonna say like, I'm gonna pretend I've read more than 4 chapters so far. I probably some kind of error message, right? Like we gotta return an error message. It's probably gonna be a string of some sort that says, "Yo, your file is improper."
That makes sense to me.
Does it make sense to anyone else? Because I feel like Jacob will just humor me.
That's not. I don't think that's usually how you do it in Rust. Usually, it's a particular like error type. So you would either have a custom, like you would have a custom like structure that, what were the? Could you go to the read to string documentation again? Like it has actual like error types that contain error information. So like you can make structs that basically follow that contract, I guess, for errors.
But we don't even need the
like error kinds.
Right, it's called
error.
It's
an error type.
It's called an error.
Error. It is so something that implements error. So like, yeah.
So we would just return an error?
We could just, instead of adding a cool message to it, we could just return the error and say, okay, here you go. Or we could make our own custom error type. I'm going to veto right now saying we're going to make our own custom error type because that is too much work right now.
Error. If it has a built-in error, let's just send the error.
Okay, so then what type do we type in here? What's the error?
Just error.
Error.
Yeah.
Where do we import it from?
Oh, it's on the prelude?
No.
I don't know.
Well, error is also
standard
like
error?
a trait, I'm pretty sure. Standard error. Okay, so standard.
See?
Yeah. Oh, cool. Okay. I'm like, there's got to be a colon situation involved.
Oh, no, I'm not going to do this. Let's use... You know what? Yeah. I'm going back over here. Okay, import from where? You want standard error?
Yeah. That one.
Oh no, that's a trait object. Because this is a trait, not an error.
I see. Hold on, let me pull up the Rust book.
Okay, so the answer is the FS module does not do it like that. So like we have...
Okay.
So we have FS.
The FS module is just going to be extra weird about it, huh?
They probably just do IO errors or something.
No, I don't think so. Okay, so instead of doing it this way, we have FS. We have a result. A result's in the prelude, but we could also do FS. I don't know if it's from here.
You can't find the result type in the FS.
That is indeed what it said.
I read it. I read it out loud even.
We'll see what it says here.
This is...
Oh yeah, I was right. It's IO result. It's not FS. But yeah.
I told you it was IO.
It's IO result.
You did.
But it's not IO error. It's IO result.
It's IO result.
Oh, my bad.
IO result string. Oh, so it is a string. That's nice.
We're all right.
It was a teamwork to get teamwork.
Yeah,
so
exactly.
wrong.
So this is a type alias. It's from a regular result. Just this is the typical way of doing it because you don't want to have to write out the error every time. Yeah, so this is an alias for typical result with an error.
Typical result error. Oh, I like that. T comma error. Perfect.
Yeah. So that's how you would do it in like a more production-y app. So now we're going to return this error. If not, so like what are we going to do here?
Let's see. Did the read to string okay, so that's the thing, like we have to ask, are we just gonna skip non-integers, non-integers in our file? Because that makes this easy.
Right, so now
we're not even to that point yet. We're just reading from a string. We haven't, we don't have the value yet. We have a string or error.
If we're not going to try to return some other type of error for like invalid input, then we can just use the question mark, because I think all of those FS read to string errors were like an IO error.
Yeah, that works for me. So you wanna?
So if that's the case, we would just use the question mark.
How would we do it without the question mark first?
We could do a match. So on the buffer,
Okay.
yeah. So we would check okay, and then if there's an error, we would return the error. And then if the buffer is okay, then we do more stuff to it to get the sum.
It's like that.
That looks right. Yeah. And so now it should return the error if we get like an IO error when we're reading the file. And then in the OK line, who could do like buffer dots? There's probably like a split lines thing.
Maybe there is.
Is it lines? Is that it?
Yeah, dot lines gives you an iterator of the lines.
Okay. Then you could just use dot sum, I guess. I don't know if the sum handles non-integer values or what it does. Otherwise, we'd probably want to do like a custom.
It does not handle non-integer values. It's just going to be like, and also it needs to know what type we're returning, which we did say is I32.
Yeah.
So a value of I32 cannot be made by summing up an iterator of string slices.
Yeah. So we'd probably want to use a reduce, I guess would work. If it's an iterator already, I think we can use reduce.
We could.
Then we write a lambda with how we want to handle that. I forget, what is it, like reduce open close parentheses, then bars with the accumulator and the item, like iterator item or whatever. And then we would inside there check if like we would parse it and try to convert it. So we would take the item and say, what is it? What is the integer conversion? Because these are all still strings.
Parse? Is that what you're talking about?
Oh, parse, and then no, because there's like a parse or something probably. So it's like if it fails, we just ignore it, right?
There's a parse or. I think it just returns a result, and then you can handle it whatever you want to do.
Maybe. Yeah. Yeah, we'd probably have to do that. Well, wait, because the parse would fail. Because we're like the parse requires a type.
Yeah.
So if we give it a string, so we probably just use I32.
So we want to parse to an I32. And
then if it's, so we can do like an if let there actually, because we don't need the failure case.
So what do we type here?
If let sum or okay. Would it be okay because it returns an error from a result? Okay, yeah. Num item parse open close parentheses or bracket at the end.
Like that?
I think so. Okay, num. Oh, I guess it is saying sum. That's weird. Because it says it's an option. Is that right?
That is. Okay. Parse returns a result. There's another error, but it's because we're returning the wrong value from our closure.
Okay. I think that's right then. So if that's the case, if it's okay, then we would return the accumulator plus num. And then we would have an else on that if let. We would just return the accumulator. Because we're not going to add it, we're going to skip it.
Okay, can we...
Uh-oh. Did
The
that's
accumulator's
interesting.
the first item in here.
Oh, it still thinks the accumulator is a string.
Well, it is a string because it picks the first number.
Yeah, so what we'd probably do is set that to 0.
How do you do that?
Oh wait, can you do that?
You're
in
skipping the
reduce?
first
What is it?
number?
There's a different reduce function. What's it called? Fold. Thank you.
So you want to
and then you can give an additional value. Yeah, there you go. That's what I want.
And then we don't want sum anymore because
we're doing it manually. Yeah.
Okay. And then we want to return sum.
Yeah, return our sum.
So running this, we got an error.
Because you didn't give the right file path.
That's true.
M's. There you go, error handling.
Yeah,
heck
that's
yeah.
what looks, well, actually, we're debugging this. There actually is.
Oh.
Like, that's still a 0 exit code.
I see.
Hey, we could do this still. It's fine. You can also return a result from main. So let's fix this, and now
yeah, fix the file.
Nums. Now we have 20, which is that right? 7,
yeah,
9, 10. Looks good, dummy.
Yep.
So then, to ask the question.
I really thought
the $1 million question.
What if we actually want to tell them that, like, beans is not right and your text file with numbers in it is actually could contain something that's formatted wrong? Like, what happens if we have a float or something like that that can't be parsed into a I32?
But you still want to add it to the sum?
Let's say we don't have that case. We only want to add integers that fit within an I32.
And then that's fine. This still works because it wouldn't. Oh, yeah. It shouldn't.
What about beans?
It should parse as an integer.
Beans is invalid.
We want an accounting file only, and there's an error under the. This is the accounting for the quarter's profits, and beans is not a valid value for the profits made in quarter.
So you want to throw an error
for year 2. So yes.
We want to let them know.
File's messed up, and we can't accept this from you.
Maybe there's something wrong in here if you have beans in the middle of your numbers. So we should let them know and give them an error.
To do the math. Yeah, this file can't be accepted. You have to go fix it. We refuse to do the math.
So,
well, in that case, you would just.
Sorry, go ahead.
Sorry, yeah, and then in that case, you would just, instead of continuing the accumulation, like in that else,
right?
We could
bail on the whole function and just error.
Like we could panic with an error message. Like we could probably enumerate and like give you the line number of the file as well, like where it failed.
That would be polite. I like that. Can we panic and give you an error message? Is that allowed?
I mean, yeah, that's what panic does.
That's what panic does. Yeah.
So we can go back up here, do dot enumerate.
Enumerate. Yeah.
And then now our item is.
Yeah, an integer or index.
So we do this.
Yep.
We have error on line.
Yeah.
Well, line I plus 1.
Yep. Yeah.
Can't do that. But
I
was 1.
Yeah.
So we have an error here. So let's see what this does. So panicked. Error on line 5.
Yep.
Okay, but will it sum properly?
this will crash their entire program, and it will not continue. So this is very sad for any, like, what if we go with the example that Neon was talking about before, which is someone else is calling this from a library, and we don't want it to just crash their whole program.
Yeah.
What if we want to instead not do that?
Yeah, in that case, we would probably want to use a custom error that we could return, right?
Right.
Or use, like, I guess, because I'd assume there's no existing IO error for you have a bad line in your file. So we'd probably need to write a custom error message or a custom error type that like inherits from IO error.
Well, can we still like have the accumulator line here and then also return a line?
Yeah.
That says,
Yeah,
like,
we could have
IO?
that. Yeah, we could have that line and just send, like, put that message in our error type, right? And then we return the error, right? Instead of doing a panic. But to do that, because our function returns an IO result type, we would have to either use that as like a generic error. I don't know if can you do like IO error and then give it the message or something. I don't know if you can do that.
If it already has that field,
concatenate a result onto there.
Concatenate a result's called mapping a result, mapping the error, which I think is a good plan.
Oh, can we do that?
Yeah, you're allowed to change what's inside of it. You just have to handle the sides.
Excellent. I want to return the standard out of the box error and a custom error at the same time.
Standard out of the box error. We couldn't return that.
Okay, I can't do that.
Because there's a standard IO error, right? Or is that...
Let's not get into all of that. We have...
Yeah, there's a lot of error types that I don't really understand how they...
IO
like,
error.
What you can use when...
So yes.
It is just IO error, okay.
So we could go for IO error. Let's see, error kind. And then look at all these, like...
Right, yeah, so there's not like... We could pick one that works, but...
Other.
Like, other. Other
Oh, okay.
works.
They have an other.
I don't think that would be a good
Probably
plan. Let's
not
see
legal
what they
in California,
want. Oh no.
But that's okay.
Probably not. So any error that does not fall under any other IO error kind. I would consider this not an IO error. It's not that kind of thing.
Yeah.
But let's instead...
So that's a question I have for you, actually. So if we actually want to handle the file reading errors, those have to be IO errors. Does that mean if we want to have like a meaningful error that we return if the parsing fails, right? Because we have like a bad value like beans in there. Do we need to wrap those into our custom error type? Because it could be an IO error that happens when you read the file, or it could be some other like parsing error that happens later down, right? Like, how do we combine those to make sense?
Mm-hmm.
Let me show you.
Okay.
Yes, we would like to see. That's perfect.
The box. It's the box.
We don't know what size it is if we return any kind of error. So I have error imported. Oh yeah, these are mask matching types. But so we can do return IO. Actually, let's grab like fs read to string, read to string. We have a path. And then we return okay. This is okay. and then we can take something else, some other error kind. What's another fun thing that returns an error? Our favorite mutex, because I can't think of anything else right now.
Just parse an
new.
integer.
0. That's good. Let's parse an integer instead.
Yeah.
32 dot parse.
Make it a bigger number.
I don't know. Let's say hi.
108.
Parse like 500 into a U8.
What have I? Oh, I accidentally made my. Is it still capital? Is my keyboard?
Are you okay?
I think my keyboard is angry at
You
me.
hit caps lock.
I'm not hitting
caps
caps
lock?
lock. I don't have a caps lock key. I'm
You
sorry.
messed up. You hit caps lock.
I don't
You'll
have
never
a
be able to
caps
Vim
lock key
again.
on my keyboard.
You lost
You
your
don't even
Vim
have that on your
license. You can't
keyboard?
use caps lock anymore.
Okay. Well, my keyboard's not nice to me today. And stop making
my
fun of me. I don't
gosh.
even have caps lock on my keyboard. Okay, I'm gonna turn it on and off. Why you
Control
do that
caps
to
lock,
me?
Caps lock, caps lock, caps lock, caps
At least we
lock.
have the debug thing there.
Yeah. So useful.
Now we can answer your question of what does the question mark operator do? And it is just syntax sugar for exactly this. Deleting.
I love syntax sugar.
Yes, I didn't see you break too.
This keyboard feels so much different. But yeah, it's syntax sugar for that. So like, look how much nicer that looks. If you're just going to return your error, then that does exactly that.
Very good.
But we still have our issue before of, oh no, we're like returning, or we're crashing our program down here. How would we go about not doing that?
Well, now we can return a proper error, right?
Yeah, we can,
Yeah.
but keep in mind we're in a closure here because we went with fold. So if we return, it returns in this closure.
Ah, yeah, that's a good point.
So we could do that, and we could do iterator stuff, or we could revert to like a for loop. There is a good way to do this with iterators, but iterators is a chapter later down the line.
Is there like a?
I'm so tempted just to break things, but I feel like that's inappropriate.
I don't want to do a for loop. I don't want to do it. Trifold? Is that what lets you do it?
It folds into a result. I would not.
Ah,
I
okay.
personally would not use fold here at all.
Really?
No.
Why?
Because we have the sum
Why?
method.
Well, yeah, but I don't know. Does the sum method work when we're trying to handle an error?
Oh, everything is just
No.
weird.
Well,
But we
then-
can like filter map, convert them all, filter out all of the bad values.
Oh,
Okay, I'll just do the simpler way of exactly what we were doing before.
Oh, filter map sounds nice.
Yeah, I didn't know about filter map. So
I didn't know about filter map
That-
either. But I have a
that-
better excuse.
that sounds like a good thing.
So we have parse, we can parse it to an I32, and then we can say dot okay, and then we can do dot sum.
Oh, trifold.
I mean, my vote is just
Thanks, Neil.
if you have to convert it to a number and we can still do sum, just use a map to convert that into what we need to instead of turning
Yeah.
it into a thing while we're summing.
Mm-hmm.
Like my vote is don't write your own sum function if you don't have to. But yeah, we have
Yeah.
filter map. This does the same exact thing, just to show you. This does the same thing.
Nice.
Cool. Yeah, I like that.
But let's not do that.
But why when we liked it so much?
We liked it so much, but it's not handling the error. Let's do it with a nice for loop. There are ways to do it. We can use iterators to get results, but we're not doing iterators right now. We're doing error handling, and it seems like.
Well, then why did you even go down that road?
Because that was the recommendation of Neon, which I followed. But I realized we should not follow that recommendation because we are not in the iterator chapter yet, which is soon, but not now. And it will be confusing.
I am now confused, yes.
Yeah, exactly. So let's do a for loop.
I do like for loops. I know most people don't, but I am rather fond of them. And if we could nest a whole bunch of them inside, that would be even better. Like we get 3 or 4. Yes. Look, so many
for
programs.
loops are fine, but
I agree with you.
Programs can be accomplished just by nesting like 4 for loops deep.
Why do you hate me? Why? Don't even say that. 4 loops deep.
It's okay. I'm also a for loop hater.
Yeah,
but
4 loops.
That is for another day. We will have our chance to shine in the iterators chapter.
I'm ready for it.
And we can iterate over results.
No.
What's a for loop?
Okay, so now we have this function, which should still work. No, it doesn't. Oh yeah, it doesn't because we are not handling this. So, like, this will fail again. So how would we go about instead doing something with this parse? We want to send them some nice error instead of a whole giant stack trace and a panic.
Right. Can't you just say error or
Not a number.
Is it IO? Oh, wait, it's not an IO error. It's a
parse in error.
Yeah, it's a parse in error. It says it there.
Yeah. I mean, we could just
return the error.
I mean, there is a way to do it before. We can return multiple types of errors.
We could do the Bockstein error, I guess.
Oh no, we can't.
It seems like, is that a common practice actually? Like, I haven't read a lot of Rust code, but it seems like you would want to avoid doing that. Like, you'd want more specific errors if you can.
I mean, it's fine to do because you can, if you only need it to be an error, it's okay. So like, yes, It hurts runtime because it has to generate code for all of the different errors it could be.
Mm-hmm.
And yes, it takes a performance hit to do it, but ultimately it's nice for ergonomics.
How much?
A majority of projects will do that.
How much time are we talking?
I don't know.
It's probably not
that
think much.
Negligible.
I'd be more worried about, I'd be more worried about like the clarity of it. Like, I guess if you have a long function and it could return like a bunch of different types, like it'd be necessary. But if you're just returning IO errors, you'd probably just want to pick an IO error and not have it be like a boxed error thing.
Yeah, so now we have parse error, kind, invalid digit.
Cool.
So
yeah,
how would we go about this? I would vote that this is unhelpful. It told me there's an invalid digit. I don't know where. Maybe this is like a million lines long. How do I know where that is?
It's pretty specific, really. But,
it's an invalid digit. That's better than nothing.
If we can specify it a line, that would be helpful.
Yeah. If we
can add a line specificity to the original error, that would be fabulous. Are we allowed to do that in Rust?
Yeah, we just can't use that question mark anymore because it just returns the default error, I think. So we would need to. Yeah, we would go back to a match, I think, for that, and then we could tell it the error message. Unless there's a question mark method, like syntax thing that lets you just do that, like a map error. Okay, yeah. Do that instead. Very fancy. I just want to let you know I have to struggle not to meow back at your cat every time I hear it in the background.
Can you hear her?
Yes.
I'm so sorry.
No, it's fine. I want to meow back at him every time.
You go for it. It
It's a
wouldn't bother
struggle.
me at all, but it might bother other people. She is so loud. I didn't even know you could. She is not even in the same room. She's at the opposite end of my house.
Awesome.
And my microphone is pointed.
Why would you look at that? We can map our error and not use a match. And
That's
now
awesome.
it says invalid line 4, invalid digit found in string.
I'm learning so many
It's-
things.
Is that right? Is that accurate?
Well,
It's
it
not
starts
on
with
line
0
4
index.
because I
Okay.
was lazy and didn't want to do it.
Like, I feel like that's not the right line.
It's true. This is so sad. I have to put it on another line.
Lies.
Is it because it's counting from the iteration and not from the correct line?
Yeah,
It's
it
0
like
index.
starts at 0. Yeah.
Okay. You need to fix that.
Wow, you're really making me do that. Use the correct number. I saw it and I didn't do it. What happened here?
No,
Oh
you're
yeah,
kind of
You were just
Mismatch.
hoping we wouldn't notice. But we did.
we're returning the result of a let binding. Of course, that makes sense. I'm just gonna actually listen to you now because I agree with you.
I assume you meant the computer, not us.
Yeah, I never agree with you.
Yeah.
That would be
you shouldn't listen to
ridiculous.
us most of the time.
Oh well, that makes sense too. We can't do that. We can return some kind of error, but we can't necessarily sum equals. Yeah, so like in your main function, you'll probably have multiple types of errors in there, unless you
Yeah.
just have one thing and you want to wrap every error in every crate in your own error.
Yeah, that makes sense.
So, never mind. Oh, I should write these questions down.
There's a chat.
No, there's like, I have derailing questions sometimes
You
that
can
I
put them in the
restrain
chat.
myself
Okay.
from saying.
So here we go. We have this now, and it gives us an invalid exit code. It gives us exit code 1 when we have an error. Gives us our error. And
On line
this,
5.
if we quiet run, so we don't get the build stuff, this is much nicer. Invalid
Excellent.
on line 5, it will fail. And if it is valid, we have instead remove this line. Then in this case, it just gives us 20 with a 0 exit code, which we
Beautiful.
should be able to see. Oh, well, it just doesn't tell us because it's fine. There's no error.
Cool.
Oh, well, actually, there's something else we could do with this error code. We have invalid line. I wrote
We could
line.
probably write it in some reasonable English.
Yeah, I call this line for some reason. This should be line, but I would consider this. Let's call this like. Line index. I don't even know. But we should. Invalid line, line on, line. That feels
You
so
really
weird.
didn't have
There's
to
a
fix
better
the
way to do that.
English of it, though.
Invalid line beans. So maybe we should also do something about that. And
You should probably put that in quotes as well. The line, like text.
what am I doing there? Escape. So yeah, we can have quotes. Invalid line. Oh well, that doesn't.
Oh, it does it encode what?
No,
That's weird.
didn't need the slashy bits, huh? Because it was already in quotes.
How is that possible?
Your bracket guys are already doing the work.
Well, yeah, it doesn't like this. No, it doesn't work that way. Just like you can't have new lines in this specific error.
Huh.
So let's actually take that back.
Just do single quotes.
Let's double quote it, but quiet. Oh no, it still does that.
Yeah. That is weird. Just use single quotes inside, that's fine.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh, I thought I did something wrong. Okay, yeah. So single quotes.
Yeah.
Okay, so yeah, that is nicer. But yeah, we have map.
Yeah.
Map error, which is nice to not have to match. We could illustrate the point by matching on another error again, but it's so much nicer not to have to do that. We have our nice methods. And
Yeah.
to go back to what Neon was saying a while ago, if we want to parse or have something else, like we don't want to error handle this at all, like say we're leaving here, well, not error handle it at all, but what you were thinking of is unwrap or,
Oh, yeah.
and
Okay.
specifically for doing 0, we can do unwrap or default, because the default for an I32 is 0 as far as I know.
Oh, cool.
Let's actually see if that's the case. Yeah, that's
That would make sense. Yeah.
So yeah, we can do this as well.
Nice.
Nice. That worked out really nicely. I love a friendly error code. Or error message, rather.
Yeah, so in here we could decide to panic, but typically this makes sense if you expect this to do some kind of error. I think unwrapping would also be fine here. Like something like starting your server makes a lot of sense to just not handle that error.
Yeah.
You could say, okay, if my server didn't start, then
Stop
panic.
everything.
Or you could try it and return a nice error, but it's whatever you would like to do there, I think.
Yeah, it kind of depends on who you expect the user of an error message to be. Like if you're pretty sure it's just going to be like developers or people who are actually like deploying code or something, then yeah, just panic because they can read error messages and figure out what's wrong with it. But if it's going to be like a front-facing user, like that's when you would want to make it more presentable.
Right. Like if it's me, I can just put panic in there because I'll figure it out.
Yeah.
But if it's not me, then I probably want to be more friendly about it.
Here's another example of something you'd do. Let's just throw this up top for the point. Like if you have, you can do a 1 exit
What's
code.
1?
You know, like 0 exit code is good and everything else is bad.
It's a Linux or Unix thing. Like by default, all C programs, like if you run them on a terminal, it'll return an exit code as an integer. And 0 just means the program ran successfully. But if it's some other number, it means it's an error of some kind, and you'd have to go look up the documentation to see what error it was based on the number.
Yeah,
Right.
so if it's like a 0, we can print line like good job. I don't know. Good job. And then now it exits
Thanks,
and we're
yeah.
fine. Or we could say bad job. Bad jobs.
No.
So it's
no.
bad jobs. And now we have an error. This is an error code. So like both of these are nicer then looking at like, we could do it here, bad jobs. So if we run this, it gives us thread main panicked at source main 4 5 bad jobs, note run with rest backtrace equals 1 environment variable. So like you can tell how panicking typically isn't a great choice if someone else is using your software, unless you really want to, they need to know this information. But I would personally hide this from my CLI tool, because if I intend for this to happen, I want to handle it or exit gracefully.
Right, smooth like butter.
I mean, on the other hand, you would want it though, like for your prototyping, because otherwise, like if you have that random error message, you'd have to go search through your whole code base to find out where it spits it out. But with the panic, you can just go to the exact file in line.
That's how it kind of feels in my brain too. Like panic is for me.
Yeah.
No panic's for anyone else.
Yeah. Like if we're developing this, we can just unwrap here and it's fine. But later on, we probably don't want to release that to production, because maybe someone does accidentally have beans in their file. We expect this to happen sometimes, but in a different case, maybe we expect their operating system to have a specific thing in it to let us run it, like process exit. Like we can't exit the process if their operating system doesn't agree. So then in that case, why should we run the program?
I'm not sure what you're saying.
Oh, like...
Yeah, I got lost too.
In a case where we expect something to happen, like let's say we have our CLI program again. Like if I type cargo run dash that, it's gonna say, why did you do this? So like I don't get a stack trace here.
Right.
But I see, okay, this is similar to quiet. I don't agree with that actually, but
right, trying to be helpful.
Yeah, so this is giving me some helpful information. It makes sense. It makes sense if a user accidentally misspells something every once in a while. Like maybe I do dash.
Once in a while, I do it all the time.
How did it get dash silent out of that?
Starts with an S.
I type dash.
Yeah, but there's not even two dashes. It's just single dash S. I guess it just filters by first like identifiable letter or something.
Oh no, dash quilt. That's wrong. I can't believe it.
What if you just
if I just run dash or what?
Well, dash passes.
Were there any like single dash commands?
Variables.
There are. Dash Q is valid. It's short for quiet. Yeah, but to get back on track, the point is, it's expected for a user to misspell something, and you shouldn't crash the program if they misspell some command-like arguments. But if something else is happening, like you're relying on them having JavaScript installed on their system, if that isn't the case, then your program can't really do much there. You can't really... You can tell them to go and install that, but your program isn't going to work. Or another example is like... I don't know. That's probably not a good one to get into. But yeah, it's kind of...
Most circumstances, I think you can give some kind of friendly error.
Yeah. I think the guideline is just handle your errors most of the time. There are some situations where you don't want to handle the error. But typically, if another user is using your code, you're not developers developing the code actively, then you probably just don't need to. Okay, but does anybody have any final questions about this chapter's content?
I really like this chapter's content. I like the whole idea that it's encouraging people to write sensible error codes and to be responsible about their stuff.
Yeah, it's one of the best parts of Rust. Just like
Yeah.
other places do have option types and do have result types, but they don't necessarily. It's not the convention to just use them. Half of people will, half of people won't. They'll throw some errors.
Yeah. Rust builds it in from the start, which is nice.
It's just nice to see some materials. It's like, you can write some error codes, and you probably ought to. It's friendly, and it's helpful. It's the responsible thing to do.
Oh no. Next chapter is lifetimes and traits.
That's good. I forgot about homework.
No.
Teacher's pet.
Yeah, teacher's pet. You better actually read this chapter.
I'll probably read it. I read the last one.
Generic types, traits, and lifetime. So at least it was fine we get into traits. I know it was in the chapter, like the trait object that we went over today. But yeah.
Which one?
Not that anyone has any control over anything.
Or dine error.
Oh, the box
dine error.
dine. Yeah. Yeah, that was in there. There was an example.
The thing we just went over today.
Yeah.
It was like, we'll go over this later and you'll understand when we get to it, but not right now. Which the book does a lot of.
Yep.
Okay. I think this one's another one that makes a lot of sense to take 2 weeks on, maybe.
I would not be opposed to that.
You're just giving me a chance to get caught up again?
Lifetimes are weird. We should take a couple weeks on it. That way I'll have a chance to read it when I inevitably don't read the first half by next Wednesday.
Oh no, I was saying like we take
2 weeks,
2 weeks to read it,
right?
And then
we
can
that's
see.
better.
I'll figure it out once I read over the
yeah.
chapter and see what's here. See how easy it is to understand. Generics probably okay. So take 2 weeks to read over. So have the next book club in 2 weeks, and then if it happens that I read this and I say, okay, there's enough content in here to go over multiple book clubs, maybe we will take lifetimes and move that to its own section.
Cool. Sounds like it might work out really well. We'll take 2 weeks to read it on our own and then possibly go over it for 2 weeks.
Yeah, something like that.
Cool beans.
Cool beans.
Sounds good. I'm gonna end the recording here then.